Hey everybody, what's happening? The First Amendment, very big right now. Everything seems to be couched in First Amendment terms. You know what? I don't mind that. I rather welcome it. It's a teachable moment. We live in a time with people with, how can I put it delicately, atrophied critical thinking faculties. That is to say, we have the mental agility collectively is of a large soap dish. And we probably should have taken like a civics class or learned this stuff in grade school, but people want easy answers because they have allowed their faculties as far as critical thinking to atrophy to a degree, and so we nuance is lost upon us, and nuance is kind of required to understand these ideas. Now, you shouldn't necessarily. Would it be helpful to have a constitutional scholar explain matters of the Constitution to you? Yes, that certainly would be marvelous, but you shouldn't have to require one because the Constitution was meant to be read by we the people. Now, of course, language changes and language evolves. And because of that, we do need to keep reinterpreting and understanding because meaning evaporates. The words may not evaporate, but the meaning of the words is constantly in flux. The Rosetta Stone would be a good way to, the meaning of the Rosetta Stone, the relevance of the Rosetta Stone is that it's a key to unlock other languages because it was three things in three different languages. That's how we figured out those other languages because one of them we knew. Yeah, it's important to understand that language changes, and that's why we all need to be constantly arguing and interpreting and deciding what it means in our culture. Some sort of thread between the original thought, but not etched in stone. Again, not etched in stone, because etched in stone fundamentally doesn't function and cannot function. I think that's wise to keep in mind. But with all that in mind, First Amendment. The big argument you're going to get these days is that the First Amendment covers all expression, that everything is covered. Now, in the vernacular, in our day-to-day life, that's generally true. The only time there are curbs on free speech, and there are curbs on free speech, and there always have been. Again, this isn't news. This isn't something new. Ooh, there are? I never knew that. Well, then you weren't paying attention in grade school. Because there are edges, right? We have libel laws. Right? We're very careful to enforce them because we want free speech as much as we possibly can, right? We want that. We don't want to curb free speech if we don't have to. So it's something you're very, very careful about, right? We want freedom of the press, assuming that the press is coming from an idealistic place where they're searching for truth. The press isn't searching for truth. If the press has become a political agent, then it gets a little more interesting, right? But assuming that the press is above politics, it isn't these days, although for its great part of its history it has been, then we want press freedoms. But here's where it gets interesting. The interesting thing with all these things are the very edges. It's at the very edges that we run into the fact that free speech does have limits. Oliver Wendell Holmes, right? The Supreme Court justice goes back forever. Fire in a crowded movie house, right? If you say something that incites violence or causes a riot or causes a civil disruption, and you do it intentionally, you're lying, you're saying something that, right, to cause that sort. Well, that isn't protected speech, right? There are edges to free speech. And again, it gets into people saying, well, there's a lot of offensive speech. We should get rid of that. And generally, the Supreme Court, in all of its various incarnations, has said, well, even the offensive, we're going to have to put up with the offensive so that we cover as much free speech as possible. Oh, right. Larry Flint, cases of pornographers saying, well, it's free speech. So all sorts of things that you might not like or you may find offensive is covered. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it. It means you can speak out against it too, and that's fine. Doesn't mean we're protecting bad ideas. But it does mean, because if bad ideas are out there, you make the counter argument and win that argument. Fine. But there are edges to free speech. There are things you can't say. And that seems right. But again, only at the very, very edge, at the absolute limit, do we impose that. One of the places we impose that is with criminal defendants. While a trial is going on, if someone's saying some crazy stuff, Sam Bankman-Fried, just a year ago, right? FTX things blows up. Sam Bankman-Fried. Sam Bankman-Fried was just put in the clank because he couldn't stop doing things that might either intimidate or try to influence jurors and witnesses and things. You go to jail for that. You can't do that. He's gone right up to the limit. The judge even said he's gone up to the limit again and again and again. I'm not putting up with it anymore. You go to jail. He's in jail. And that's not new. We do it all the time. So keep that in mind as you're watching. You should be paying attention to this J6 case. Judge Chutkan, wow, she is something else. Well, I'll give her this. She is straight by the book. She is not giving the prosecution everything it wants. Good. And she's not going to go for every tactic gone by the defense. And the defense is going to run for, because they have no defense. And I think they know they have no defense. So they're not even trying to, I don't know how much they're really trying to win a case here. I think what they're trying to do is win in the court of public opinion, and they're going to say, oh, we are the victim, and look at the big bad government attacking us. It's the sort of thing Al Capone, it's that kind of argument. You know, look how they're mistreating me. What a fine fellow I am, but boy, they're all ganging up on me. That seems to be a big part of what's going on here. And so it's going to be a free speech argument. Everything's going to be free speech. My First Amendment rights are being curtailed. Well, the truth is, First Amendment rights do have a limit and can be curtailed. I'll give you the other one. I want more free speech. I always do. All right. But I think there is a limit. Musk these days. I'm a free speech absolutist. That's too bad because he shouldn't be. And he's an absolutist because it's a way of saying, look, I'm on the right side of this argument. I want more free speech. And now it's a cover to say, now let's get all sorts of fascist trolls to speak more because we want that. Whoa. It's trying to tilt the playing field here. So more awful stuff can be stated. Like that's a good thing. And that's not a good thing, right? So when people say, I'm a free speech absolutist, good, you could push back easily on that one and not be some kind of, some person who wants to get rid of all free speech. Now, are there and have there been forces that want to limit free speech? Yep. And most of my life, that came from the right. These days, it more likely comes from the left and has for about a good 25 years. What's that all about? Well, I will speak for myself. Earlier in my life, for years and years and years, the people tut-tutting you and saying you shouldn't say this and you shouldn't say that as a way to protect patriarchy, bigotry, misogyny, all sorts of racism, basically came from the right. Moneyed folks, educated, moneyed folks from who lived at country clubs and played a lot of tennis. The golf crowd, that crowd on the right, old money, boy, they were saying, you really shouldn't say this. And the polite people don't say that. And it was a way of, what's the way of doing? Enforcing norms and controlling thought, which is the business, look, it's the business all political organizations are in. They are. And it's the job most religions are in. Controlling the thought, policing the thought, and enforcing their sense of values. And that arena of ideas where the fight takes place, that's fine. More recently, again, by more recently, I mean the past 25 years, you'd get it from the left. Political correctness, right? The idea that, and this blew me away when it started to happen. I'm like, this is coming from the left. The guys who were generally the guys wanting more free speech were now you got the argument that, and it was well intentioned. We want less bigotry, we want less misogyny, we want less. We're trying to stand up for the rights of minorities, and we're trying to stand up for the rights of LGBTQ, and we're all good things, all well intentioned, right? Nothing wrong with that. But you shouldn't say this and you shouldn't say that, and this is offensive and that's offensive. Having some sensitivity to that, to the degree that caused people to go, ooh, I should think through that a little bit more. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But if it stifles free speech, and it inevitably does, it's not a great thing, and it is something. It's easy for me to say we should allow a degree of offensive speech in there to preserve the overall idea of free speech. Easy for me to say when I'm a white guy of my age, right? I'm not the sharp end of all the bad things that happen when you open up free speech. It's minorities and it's women and it's LGBTQ. Okay. So, but I'm aware of that. But I do think collectively it's a nuanced thing and it's a tricky thing, and finding the balance is very hard, and we're not going to agree on it. But the idea that there is no holds barred, that there is no edge to free speech, sorry, not right. People telling you that, they are getting it wrong. They're wrong, right? There is an edge. Yes, it's at the very, very, very edges, but it's there. Give you a simple, silly examples. Newton, right, when he wrote the Principia, basically figured out how the natural world works. At least, it basically did it with stone knives and bearskin and figured out the entire natural world with the equivalent of science in scientific tools of, stone knives and bearskin. He figured out how everything basically works. And that ruled until you finally get to Einstein. And when you think of Einstein, what Einstein obviously figured out was very important, but it was at the very, very edges of science. For the most part in your life, almost everything that you experienced was explained to you by Newton. That still holds. Einstein is an overlay on that. Now, an important overlay, because if there was no Einstein, I wouldn't be talking to you on this device. Right? All that happens. Nuclear war too, right? All that happens. That's a pretty important last little percentage point or two. But we are talking about the edges of science. He wasn't saying Newton got everything wrong. He accepted like 99% of Newton, and then we're tweaking the edges, which gave us some fantastic insights. And that's where science is at. It's always at those very, very edges. There's some interesting things going on in physics these days. Okay. So let me throw all that at you, so I can now shift gears and talk a little bit about having strong opinions and having preferences when it comes to the arts. I'm going to shift it to music because that's my field. But all of that discussion we're having does relate very strongly to what I want to chat about today. I think that we're at a time, because we're now being very careful about what we say. Again, not necessarily a terrible thing. And guess what? I'm sitting here burning, right? There's no script. Camera, I put it up, and I go. Okay. I'm guaranteed to make a mistake. It's guaranteed that I will say something, and I probably could have put it better. That given time to write and rewrite and so forth, I would have said something in a slightly different way. Right? So this will not be in any way perfect. Right? This is extemporaneous. There's great value to the extemporaneous, and the problem is, so please, I ask for your forgiveness, your forbearance, that, if I say something wrong, I might clarify at some point. But I think there is a tendency for us to be very, very careful about what we say, that we feel we have to, that we feel we can't be critical of anything because that makes us some kind of hater. I am not advocating that we go after all sorts of things that we dislike, that we wake up in the beginning of the day and say, how can I go after something? That shouldn't be how we start our day, and I'm not advocating that. But I am saying that if we're so cowed that we can't make a criticism, because we feel that any criticism that we make, oh, we've turned into this, because of the prevalence of trolls and haters. We don't want to be taken for that person. Fair. But we still have to be able to, a degree of artistic criticism, of cultural criticism is good. Again, you don't want to live despising everything, but okay. Let me throw some things at you. I'll make it a little more personal. When I was growing up, it was obvious very early in my life how important music was. It very early on, I just had this strong emotional reaction to it. I had a sensitivity to it. I loved it. It hit me, and I didn't need. It was very specific what was hitting me. I was trying to figure it out. What is it that's hitting me? And it wasn't. People say, "Oh, listen to this song, Dave. Do you like? Oh, he likes music. Listen to this song." Dave. Generally, I didn't want to listen to songs and hear words. I'm like, that's not it. I kept going for stuff that was instrumental. That's what got me, because I didn't want anything to get away or anything that was a distraction. I didn't need a language. I wasn't having a language thing. I wasn't having a theatrical thing. No, I wanted to get rid of all the words and get rid of. I didn't need a movie to get rid of all that. Put me in a room where there were no distractions. It was just the notes. That's what was doing it for me. And as I remember being in middle school and I was starting to play trumpet, and I was in we were playing like chorales at Christmas time. There was no vocals at all. And I remember playing like the second part. But those middle notes could be so great, even in simple little harmonies you play in middle school, junior high. Just falling in love with those notes, how those notes bumped into other notes, how they rubbed together. It gave you this emotion. And that was it. That's really what I liked. So that's a very specific thing. So I think people will sit there and go, oh, you like music? Oh, you must like this. And then they mention all this other stuff. And I go, no. What I like is actually pretty narrow. There's a very specific thing that does it for me, that I will go seek out. And I think a lot of people misunderstand that. They can't understand. They think of music and they go, oh, there must be some other thing. That the idea of the music by itself couldn't be enough because it's not enough for them. So it must be, you must like musical theater because you need another thing. It's like a musical helper. You don't need, the thing isn't enough by itself. So you need some other thing to amp it up more. No, those other things only take away from, getting me distracted from the thing I want to deal with. I don't want a theatrical experience. I don't want a literary experience, a poetic experience. I just want the notes. That's the thing. So as a kid, there was a lot of pop music around when I was growing up. It didn't do it for me. But I got turned on to jazz. Oh, wow. And not vocal jazz, instrumental jazz. Listen to all that going on. And they're making it up as it goes along. And it's percolating. Oh, my God. And I got into classical music. And at first, larger forces. Gateway Drug were symphonies and all that sound, all that stuff going on. Oh my God. Right? So as a kid, I was listening to all that. In the days before the Walkman existed, I had found a way to put a cassette deck into my coat when I was skiing as a kid. And I had wired an earpiece and I could listen to music while I was skiing. Instrumental music. I remember Grieg piano concerto in the middle of winter in my ear with a tape deck inside my coat. I was into it. I was into the sound. But I was listening to that kind of music as a kid, um, as a middle school kid. I got very into it, and I grew up in Maine, in the southern coast of Maine, a little town called Old Orchard Beach, which is just south of Portland, Maine. So the only real record stores was at a mall in South Portland, Maine. So I would go to that mall and go find every record I could get, but it was fairly limited. And I realized I was listening to jazz, which was primarily, at least, especially at that time, an American thing. And I was listening to Western classical music, which was primarily a European thing, primarily. And it occurred to me that, boy, I was missing an awful lot of real estate. What about all the indigenous musics of all the rest of the world? Wasn't I missing an awful lot? Well, I'll tell you a story. My dad was a fascinating guy, and my dad was an English teacher, and he believed in getting us exposed to as many different things as possible. I have a brother, and the two of us, we were his science project. And one of the things, though, he had all sorts of hobbies and various things, but one thing that he got very into, and when the bug grabbed him, it grabbed him hard, just like it is with me, just like it is with my son. It runs in the family, that. And so he was a stamp collector. He collected postage stamps, right? He was a philatelist. And he loved New York City. So he would occasionally, when I was in middle school, this one right through high school, on a Friday, he would sit there and go, you know what? I'm going to New York. It was a 6-7 hour drive. I'm driving to New York this afternoon into tonight, getting a hotel. Want to come? Sure. And I would go with him, and we would go to New York City and get a hotel somewhere on the west side. Now we have a hotel. Fine. And the next day we'd get up and get breakfast. Fine. And then he would say, okay. He knew I knew New York City because I had relatives in New York City. I'd been in New York City. I could walk around New York City. No problem. I was fine in New York City. And he was like, okay, we're splitting up. You take off, and we will meet at 5 p.m. You show me what you saw. I'll show you what I got. We'll have dinner. Lunch, you're on your own. You can find lunch. Now keep in mind, 7th, 8th grade. No cell phones, right? Got to watch. Meet you at 5 o'clock. So we would take off. Now, my dad would go to find stamps that he couldn't find in Maine because there were all kinds of brokers in New York City, and you could find that. I went to record stores because I could find all sorts of stuff that I would never find, right, in Maine. So I would go and I would get records of indigenous music, traditional music, Australian, indigenous tribes of Australia, the music that was recorded, field recordings, South America, Africa, Eastern Europe, Bulgarian choirs, China, Tibet, Japan, Tehran, Iranian music. And I would listen to this stuff. Not that I necessarily liked it. It didn't matter. I was studying. I wanted to get all of it in me so I knew what that stuff was. I wanted to know. I listened to everything I could get my hands on. Everything I could get my hands on. And I still have all that stuff. The record still exists. They're upstairs, actually. But I have all that stuff that I went out and got in an effort to hear. I want to know everything if I could. If I could have absorbed all of it, I would have absorbed all of it. I wanted to know everything I could possibly know. So I knew what my likes and dislikes were. Why did these musics do things the way they did it? Why? I wanted to understand. So I've listened to a lot of music, right? And here's the thing. I think it's okay. I think we have to give ourselves permission to develop our taste, our personal taste and preferences. Doesn't mean that we're right about everything. Again, this is subjective. Our personal taste, which means you're allowed to not like things. You're not going to like everything. Some stuff you're not going to like. I'm here to tell you it's fine. It's fine. In general, it's the second law of thermodynamics. Everything's going to crap. It's an ordered state is tougher to achieve, right? There's a reason the top of the ziggurat is the top of the ziggurat. It's harder to get to that. It's harder to make something that's the good stuff, the really good stuff is more rare. So it's okay to recognize that there are these levels. While you're an elitist, then you're an elitist. But there is no doubt there is better stuff and not so great stuff in virtually anything. And it's okay to say that. Give you another dumb example. Let's go for dumb sports analogies. Sure. I love hockey. I love hockey. I like hockey particularly today. Sports go up and down. Not just, the current thing is great because it's the current thing. No, not necessarily. Baseball, which I loved, is basically self-lobotomized and now become this, I can't stand what they've done to baseball. I think they've absolutely screwed it up and they can't follow it and won't watch it. Hockey, on the other hand, has actually improved because I think by making it less violent, making it more about skill, the game is faster and I just think it's being played on a great. So I'm a fan of the sport. I'll watch. I don't care who's playing it, if the game is good. That's important. If the game is good, I don't just watch all hockey because it's all great. It's all equal. No, it's not. If I watch Toronto and Vegas, or if I watch Boston and Tampa, I'm going to get some hockey. But guess what? If on my screen, and I have the hockey package, I get all the games. If it's Arizona and Columbus, I'm not watching that because it's awful. It's bad hockey by bad organizations who can't get their crap together. Can't do it. So it's bad hockey. I don't watch that. And you're allowed to say, those two teams don't play very well. And their record shows they don't play very well. Oh, do you hear something? You hear scratching? There's a kitty cat up there scratching because she wants to come downstairs. And she'll just keep doing it. There's no winning this fight. I don't know if you can hear that. Bang, bang, bang. That's a kitty cat. Her name is S'mores. And she ain't taking no for an answer. She's a sweetie. But hold on a moment. One moment. Let's go get the kitty cat. S'mores! Come on, S'mores. There you go. Come on. Okay, folks. Okay. Here's who was knocking at the door. This is S'mores. She's a sweetie. She's a cutie pie. But she likes to knock on the door. Little gray and white kitty. A bit of a scaredy. She gets scared of everything. But she's a sweetie. I love her to death. And I'm her guy. What can I say? Anyway, we're talking about, there are levels of good and not so good. Look, there's, which is to say there are bad musical performances. There are. Some bands are better than others. Some bands aren't so good. It's okay to say that. And it's okay also to say there are whole styles of music that just don't do it for me. I will tell you that I think there's great music being done in virtually every style. But the percentages are better in some than there are in others. And so that's it can make a lot of people very uncomfortable. But I think we do need to be able to say that. And I'll admit, there are styles I like and styles I don't. I'm not a huge pop music fan. Now, that being said, there's been stuff over the years that I just adore. I'm not a big singer-songwriter guy. I never liked Elton John. But that's not to say I loved ELO. I think Jeff Lynne is brilliant. I love everything he did. I love a lot of things most people, I suppose, like that's fairly mainstream. I saw a Cure concert this summer, right? I love the Cure. I couldn't believe Robert still sounded great, and he does. But boy, they were taking chances. That band always did. There's all sorts of stuff, pop music, that I've loved. But in the overall, it's probably a very tiny percentage of stuff that I actually like. If you're a singer-songwriter cat, right? Nick Drake records, 5 Leaves Left and Pink Moon. Oh my God. Shadows and Light, the album by Joni Mitchell. Oh my. There's brilliant stuff. But in the main, I'm not a huge fan of it. Am I a big fan of the big acts that go on tour these days? No, because I think what they're doing is essentially theater. It's a production with costume changes, and that's not where my interest lies. I'm interested in the sound and in the music. Oh, generally, do I like country music? No, never liked country music. The values being pushed. If it's country versus urban, I'm always urban. If it's family and life and all that, no. But let's be democratic. Do I only dislike rednecks? No, no, no. Of course not. This is the 50th anniversary of hip hop. I'm not a huge hip hop guy. This stuff I like, but in general, it's not giving me most of the stuff that I'm looking for. It's about a kind of advocacy, and obviously it's a spoken word sort of thing. I think in a lot of times, and this is a weird comparison, but hear me out, rap reminds me of the same reason I'm not crazy about folk music. Folk music was about, migrant farm workers, and you can't dismiss the cultural impact of folk music and why that was important. And as a political statement, it's definitely art, it's definitely artistic, it's definitely making a statement, it's all those things, and rap is too. But neither of them really hit me in the areas that I'm interested in. But again, I don't think it makes you a criminal to say that I don't personally, that's not my thing. That's not what I'm going to go running for. I don't think it's all, oh, it's so brilliant. Everyone's brilliant. I don't think it's all brilliant. Meaning any of these various styles. I don't, including current classical music, current jazz. I'm not crazy about current jazz because I think they've kind of lost their way. I'm interested in, I'm not crazy about people sitting there going, well, here's an established style, I'm just going to do that. That doesn't strike me as terribly creative. I'd rather see more people do things where they're trying to find out what's a sound relevant to this culture, our current culture. And I think that's what the really interesting artists have always done. Find what scratches the itch of this time, and that's a moving target. So sitting there, in jazz and classical music, it's gotten so pedantic now. It's now the idea of being creative even seems like a dirty word there. It's all about look at about virtuosity. Look how perfect I play and how perfect this one. That's it. That's the thing. Okay. That can be empty. That can be musical masturbation, right? So I'd like to, I'm more interested in something it could be stylistically, it could be all over the place, but as long as, or better yet, a mix of styles or something we haven't yet heard, that mixes things in a new way, in a novel way that speaks to this time, because this time is not 10 years ago or 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. It just isn't. It's this. We've got to work on that. So I would like to see people doing that. I don't see anybody, it's like a cop-out to sit there and say, oh, yes, but I'm going to do this previous style and do it perfectly. Okay, what are you saying? Well, it's not, I'm not, they're basically not saying anything. They're craftspeople. That can't be. Then you're not doing something artistic. I'm interested in the art. So, but having this conversation, saying that it's okay to have a preference. It's okay to say, again, you're not saying that because they're my preferences, they need to be yours too. Oh, no, no, no. You get to do your own thing. We all do. It's great. That's a good thing. But there are folks who would shush you from doing that. I think they're making a mistake. I think it's what's really hip and neat is to be able to have these conversations. So it goes back to where we started, right? An ability to, these things, don't shush people, don't tut people. Cultural criticism, I think, is something we need more of. you know? And again, not mean-spirited necessarily. We're not going after people. I mean, you shouldn't be going after people. I'm not going after people. It's not, wake up my day, let's go after somebody. I mean, there's a lot of that. Yes, that's not a great thing. But the idea of just being able to talk about these preferences and stylistic things and an admission that it's not all, I love all of it equally. You know, I worry about someone who thinks like that. I really do. You know, if everything is great, then nothing's great. It's all the same. And that makes you a great defender of the arts. Yeah, no, I don't think it does. I think getting persnickety about these and being able to talk about the minutiae, that's important. You got to be able to do that. Don't just, paint with a wide brush and try to cover all that up because you don't want to have the conversation. That's not raising the level. That's back to dumbing it down more. Having these conversations and that the differences matter, the differences do matter, those are conversations worth having. So that's where I'm going to leave you guys. We hit a lot today. Give me a like. Feel free to give me a comment. I guarantee, I'm sure I got something wrong here. And if I did, apologies in advance. And if you want to correct me, I will listen to there are all sorts of views on this. And I'm not going to, and you may have a very different, you may disagree with me on all this violently. And I'm not knocking you for that at all. It is, but if I've made you think a little bit, or at least it helped you, sometimes just talking about it, even if you disagree with a person like me, fine. But it helps refine your own thoughts about why you think what you think, and what you think is important, and why you think it's important. And if I've done that, then I'm helping too. But that's part of the reason we have the conversation. It's not about, agree with me. No. Thinking about it by itself, diving into it, diving deep, that's worthy. So if it does that, or helps you do any of that, give me a like, kids. Let me know what you're thinking. All right, I'll talk to you guys in a week. There'll be plenty more to talk to by then. See you.